But yeah, this is our January series lecture. Here at ATAR Notes, we've got heaps of free resources that I really recommend using. We've got hundreds of downloadable study notes for free. We've got lectures like these where you can learn from the best, which are so good, especially in the holidays. We've got our discussion board, so if you have questions, they're so good to go on and ask anything. Engaging online revision videos, newsletters, everyone's favorite, the ATAR calculator. We've got study articles with strategies and tips and a lot more on our brand new website. So check it out. Check it out. And then we do have more resources. So we've got our Tute Smart program, which is online tutoring from elite recent Year 12 graduates. We've got our study guides. I've got one from my lecture yesterday here, which are literal lifesavers, and they're the printed revision materials. And then if you're not interested in buying like the physical book, you can always go to Ed Unlimited, which has the online copies all in one place. So definitely recommend all of that. But yeah, this is our HSC Modern History Jan 2023 lecture. We love modern. We love modern in this house. What time is it? Okay, it's been 2 minutes. We'll give it another minute because it's 10. It's like early. I'm sure a lot of you guys have been sleeping in these holidays. I know, like, I woke up an hour ago. So everyone's pretty tired. If you guys do have any questions throughout the lecture, please leave them in the question box. Please leave me absolutely any question. I will answer anything. Even if it's not related to modern and it's just about HSC, or even if it's not about HSC, we'll just have a chat. We'll just have a chat. And you guys can press the resources button and download all these slides. They're pretty jam-packed, and there's quite a lot of content in here. So I do recommend downloading the slides. Don't worry about like writing notes. You can if you want to, but modern is so jam-packed. So I'd rather if you guys try to like take everything in and ask questions that way. Up to you if you want to take notes though, but you don't have to because you can always come back to these slides. On this website there's going to be a lecture recording of it as well, so if you want to hear me talk for 2.5 hours again, you can always just come back to the lecture. That is all good. But a little bit about me before we start. So I graduated in 2021 with a 96.3 ATAR. So I'm still 19, so I don't feel like too far from you guys. I feel like I'm not that much older. These are some of my marks, but the one that matters is a band 6 in modern. Right now I'm studying a Bachelor of Education to teach English and Business Studies in high school. And then I was going to do English and modern because I feel like a lot of teachers do that duo, but I don't know, something about teaching modern for the rest of my life just didn't sit right with me. I really liked studying modern history. But you guys probably already know how heavy it is in terms of content. And I was just like, can I do this for life? And the answer was no. But I do tutor modern and have sat modern units at uni. So I am all good. I'm all good in terms of modern. And just a bit about me, I love tennis. So I'm very happy that it's Australian Open right now. It's a pic of me and Nick Kyrgios. Not looking very happy, but we're not surprised. I love reading. I'm like the biggest Swiftie ever. That's me at a Taylor Swift night screaming my head off. And I love my friends. But that's a bit about me, guys. So we're going to get started now because it's been a couple minutes. I'm sure people are still joining. Couple questions just so we get the vibe of what's going on right now. And we need to be honest. If you guys have studied for modern these holidays, because I'm curious. I'm curious. You guys can see and vote below. And it's all good if you haven't, because I feel like, I don't know, with modern, it's not English or math, especially like when I was in school. I'd always, like when I was prioritizing my study, I never really had modern on the top of my list. So completely understandable if you haven't studied. That's completely fine. We'll wait for some votes to come in. If you guys see me looking to the side or above, I've just got the slider and like the poll results. So that's why I'm always looking away. But we'll give it some time for everyone to vote. These answers are completely anonymous. And any questions that you guys ask are also anonymous. So don't stress about if you think it's a dumb question, because it's not a dumb question. And even if it really, really is, no one knows who it is. It's completely anonymous. but we'll give that some time to come in. And yeah, like I said, absolutely any questions, just let me know. You can leave them in the question box. Okay. I'm not sure if the poll's not working. Can you guys see that? I'm very confused right now. Okay. Oh, I was gonna say, is no one on this lecture right now? Okay. All right, guys, I'm liking the vibe so far. I love that I thought about it. That's always a mood. That is always a mood. All right. Well, that's completely fine if you guys haven't, or if you haven't gotten the most done. Because I'm going to go through what we're going to go through in this lecture. And we're going to get through literally the entire core in 2.5 hours. So we should be all good, even if, because all you would have had to study is revision on based what you did term 1. Thanks for voting, guys. It's good that a few of you got some stuff done. But like I said, I don't know, like it's modern, like it's hard to prioritize modern with other subjects. So that's completely understandable, and holidays aren't over yet. And like I say in every lecture, you guys signing up to be here, it's studying. That's studying. That is studying. All right, let's go. I've just got a couple questions just because I want to see what the vibe is. Did your class finish the core unit last term? I really need to know this. Hopefully most of you guys have. If not, we'll finish it and we're going to go through it today. Ah, interesting. Some people didn't study the core. If you didn't study the core, can you leave in the question box what unit you did study? I'm actually very curious. Because most schools do start with the core, but most of you are finished. Interesting. This is interesting. Okay, so most of us finished it. Some of us aren't completely finished and others haven't started. But either way, it doesn't matter, because if you've already studied the core, this lecture is going to go completely over it. So if you have any questions on any of it, we can go over it. It's going to be a big revision of it. And then if you haven't learnt the core yet, this will be a really good introduction where you'll get the basis and like a really good overview of it all. And then if you have a few more dot points to go, we're going to go through the dot points. So you guys are all good. Thanks for answering that. And I just want to know how we're rating modern so far, because I feel like term 1, I don't know, when I did modern, term 1 wasn't that bad. Like the core was all right. And then you get to the national study and you get to the part where you have to write 2 essays, literally 2 essays in the HSC, and it just goes downhill. So I'm not surprised to see that so far we're loving modern. But I feel like if this was like the September lecture and it's right before HSC, we'd be in the sad face. But it's good that we're vibing with modern so far. I feel like the core, especially if most of you guys have done it, is a good place to start at, and it doesn't feel too heavy. Especially if you've looked at Germany in year 11. Interesting. All good. All right, we're gonna get started with the lecture. Any questions? I really, really, really stress this. Any questions you guys have, please leave them in the question box. I will get to everything. And don't worry about your name and everything. It's completely anonymous. Even if you're leaving it throughout the lecture, we're going to have dedicated Q&A blocks, 2 of them, to answer any questions. But then also if you're asking questions throughout, I've got my iPad right next to me to check them and answer as we go. So we should be all good. But thanks for voting for that, guys. It seems like we're like modern lovers in this house. Seems like we're vibing with modern so far. That is good to hear. Okay, all good. So let's do a lecture summary just so you guys know what we're looking at today. So our first block is going to be the core study, where we're going to go through an overview of all of it. And our second block is short answer responses, where we're going to look at short answer responses, how to write them. Sorry, got to do some source analyses, and we're going to look at essay writing. So that's more the skills part. And then the first part's going to be the core study. There's always the option to go into national studies, but because the nature of modern and how many different students do different topics, it's really hard to have a lecture that can suit everyone, because a lot of people do Russia, for example, for the national study. But if you're doing another country, then the whole lecture is kind of useless. So we try to cater it to everyone, and that's why the core is always great to use in our lectures. And then our block 2 is catered for the other topics, but the skills you're using in them, and less the content. So we're going to have the dedicated Q&A sections. We're going to have a break. Don't worry. I know it's 2.5 hours, which is frightening. But we're going to get through a lot today. All right. Let's start with the core study. Again, any questions, please leave them. We're going to get to them, and you can upvote questions that you guys like. We're going to have polls throughout this and that. That is all good. All right. Let's do the core. So the core essentially is the easy section, and I'd like to say, and I think that it's the easiest section of all of modern history. It is easy, don't get me wrong, but on average, over 10,000 students study modern history, and all of them, every single student does the core. So I feel like it's harder to stand out when there's like so many people doing it. And in this, you don't need to stand out. So unlike other sections, you don't get the question options. So I'm not sure if a lot of you guys have seen how the paper is formatted, but I definitely recommend just searching up like HSC Modern History and checking how the papers are structured. But for the core, you're just going to get short answer responses that can get up to 12 marks, but can also be really small. I've answered like 2-mark questions and 3-mark questions as well. But you don't get the option. And in the end, it's not a 25-mark essay. So I feel like if you're struggling with modern, focus on the core, because it's much harder to get 25 out of 25 than it is to get 2 out of 2 and 4 out of 4 and then 5 out of 5 and add up the little marks. The bad thing about the core and like the non-easy thing is that what you get is what you get. I like the essays because at least you get 2 questions, so you can choose one and you can pray that one is a good question. But what you get is what you get, so it's pretty tough in the core, which is why it's really good to just have a really general overview knowledge of everything. But please don't underlook the core. I'm telling you from now, when you get into the next topics in modern, they're so heavy and it's so specific, and especially when you're essay writing and you don't know if they're going to ask you on 1 dot point and there's 12 dot points across the syllabus, it's so easy to stress out and put all your energy into this and remember back to the core and be like, oh, it's easy, like just need to remember a couple easy stuff. But like I said, it's a lot easier to get marks in the core, and you're better off performing really, really well in the core than you are in the essays, because those little marks will add up, but it's really easy to lose a mark in the essays. But it's easy to get the extra mark in the core, if that makes sense. So yeah, do not take the core for granted, and that's why we're going to be going through it today. All good. So we've got the background of the Weimar Republic, but I just quickly want to put it out there that we're still going to go back to the interwar period and Treaty of Versailles, but we're going to bring it up in the context of the Weimar. So we're starting at the dot point where it's the rise of the Nazi Party and Hitler in Germany and the collapse of the Weimar Republic. So here's how it all starts. So the Kaiser gets abdicated and the monarchy is abolished. So we're like, okay, we need a new system. But then there's all these different groups. There's the SDP, there's the Spartacists, there's Revolutionary Socialism, all these different groups, and everyone's trying to come together on what to do. So then they declare the new republic, and then that is the birth of the Weimar Republic. So they held the elections in 1919, and then the SDP formed a coalition with the Democrats and the Catholic Center so that they could have their majority government. But it was still the Republic, and they had Scheidemann as a chancellor. Hitler and the Nazi Party. So Hitler emerges as a party leader by 1921. He was the one who personally designed the Nazi Party banner, and you guys probably know about the 25-point program, which outlines the party platform and kind of their ideology. Other members attempted to halt his rise to power, but his offer was rejected because he played such a key role in the party when he tried, when he was told that his power was too dictatorial, and it was just a whole manipulation thing. So you guys probably already know that with Hitler, but he always found a way to be at the top. But the Nazi Party membership grew really, really, really rapidly. By 1923, it was already at 55,000 members, which is insane. So a key pattern that you're going to notice, and I really want to stress this, is that the Weimar failure is why the Nazi Party succeeded. This is so important. This is a great first sentence if you get a question on the Weimar, or if you get a question on why the Nazi Party succeeded. The Weimar's failure was a direct catalyst for the Nazi Party success, and that's just a really good, I feel like in modern, making connections like these is so important because they're your theses in these short answers. So the Nazi Party capitalized on the failures of the Weimar Republic in order to secure popular support. So because the Weimar Republic was so bad and they were struggling and failing so bad economically, politically, everything, socially, the Nazi parties, they literally capitalized that. They highlighted their failures, and then that made them look better. But it's not necessarily anything that the Nazi Party was specifically doing. It was just that the Weimar was so bad that everyone was like, oh, the Nazi Party must be great. Okay, so the rise of the Nazi Party and Hitler, when we're looking at the constitutional flaws of the Weimar, and my recommendation for modern is always split it up into themes. I feel like thematically it makes a lot more sense. So you can talk about the failures of the Weimar, but split it up into the political failures, the social failures, the economic failures, and that way if you have a point for each, it's spread across the board and it's more general rather than just focusing on the constitutional flaws. And I recommend that for your essays as well. I know you guys haven't gotten, or a lot of you guys haven't gotten into the national study yet. But when you do, splitting it into themes and looking at the social factors, the political factors, military factors, and splitting up thematically really helps grab those band 6 marks. So the big problem with the constitution of the Weimar was that they had proportional representation because there were all these little groups and no one could come together to agree. So there was no majority, and they couldn't get to one point. So in the end, they were pretty useless because they weren't really passing any laws. So it made it impossible for the party to secure a majority. And if you can't secure the majority, then it's going to be really hard to get laws passed. So they didn't really end up doing anything. So then they were like, okay, well, there's no majority, which is what we see in the infographic up here. They were like, let's form the coalition. And they thought if we do this, we get larger parties aligning with the smaller parties. But then the larger parties were compromising themselves and the smaller parties were getting disproportionate power. So it really wasn't working. And then another really important factor that everyone, when it comes to Weimar Republic, please remember Article 48, because Hitler literally used that to his advantage and was one of the biggest catalysts for him rising to power. But Article 48 was that the president could rule without consulting the Reichstag in an emergency, which can obviously be abused in order of the dictatorship, which is what Hitler did. So he used this rule that they implemented, called an emergency, and that literally was the point that he rose to power. So Article 48 is very important to remember when we're talking about the Weimar. I want you guys to consider this. So this is actually from my trial. I got it from my trial paper. But it's how does source A reflect the reasons for the collapse of the Weimar Republic? So in this, what you can do, because it's an image, I feel like images in modern, especially when they're it's not it's not like a photo source, it's like a factual source. So this really threw me off because it was the first time that I had seen um like a source like this, like in an exam. But what you can do here is you can kind of use, like you do in English, and you look at like the techniques in the photos. When you look at it, all the different colors represent all the different parties. So when we're talking about the constitutional flaws of the Weimar Republic, a big one is how there were too many different parties and they can't pass laws, which are represented by the different colors. So that itself is already a really good point to make, and that's the biggest constitutional flaw. And then you can also go into detail on how it gives you the names of the different parties. And if you compare Catholic Center to Communist to National Socialists or the German Peoples, there's obviously different interests within those groups, and very like differing ideologies. So when you have so many different groups with so many different ideologies who are refusing to come together and agree, how is anything going to be passed? So then you can say that the reason for the collapse of the Weimar Republic was because of proportional representation, and the lack of a majority displayed through all the different colors. And then you can also make the point that by 1933, the Nazi Party had complete control. But that's a 3 marker, and it's not like, I feel like in modern with the short answers, everyone really pressures themselves to write like these really great, like these solid, like 10 out of 10 responses. But in the 3 markers, and especially in the shorter marks, they're not looking for much. They really want a pretty solid answer and then just some backup. And for this, that would be 3 out of 3, and that's what I wrote in mine, and that was 3 out of 3. So with the shorter marks, don't worry about putting too much effort. Definitely when it gets up to higher marks, when it's 6 plus, especially if you get a 12 marker, that is where we're going to switch our brains onto work mode. Okay, let's talk about the Treaty of Versailles for a bit. The Weimar Republic, in relation to the Weimar Republic, they were blamed for the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles. So some of the terms of the treaty included reparations, which were 132 billion gold marks. I know with statistics and with numbers, everyone's all over the place, and some people are like, don't worry about memorizing, or you need to memorize everything. When it comes to the treaty, I recommend memorizing the 132 billion gold marks, just because it is like a specific detail, and it can make your answer just a bit more solid. But you don't need to remember like all the really specifics. Like I've got here, like the Treaty of Versailles was crippling. They had territorial concessions, 1 million square miles and 6 million subjects. Like you don't need to know like exactly. I'd say the deaths, so there were 600,000 plus civilian deaths for Germany, and 69.4% of all their mobilized soldiers were killed or injured. But there were also limits of Germany's military, and then the war guilt clause, which completely blamed Germany entirely for the entire war. So you can use different things, but I'd say these 4 here are the big ones. And then they claim them and the Weimar Republic as the November criminals, and Hitler was very big on creating this stab in the back legend, but everyone else kind of backed it up, and it was a conspiracy between leftist Weimar politicians, communists, and Jews to sabotage the war effort. So they blamed the Weimar, they blamed communists, and they blamed Jews, and said that it was their fault, and they stabbed them in the back by signing that guilt clause, and they're the reason Germany is struggling financially, socially, politically. They blamed everything on those 3 groups. And then when you look at it, the Weimar collapsed, they were out of the picture, and then Hitler's main targets were communists and Jews. So this stab in the back legend was really something that he was a strong proponent of, and he campaigned it so hard that his Nazi party was reversing the Treaty of Versailles, so that he could gain support. So the Treaty of Versailles is very big when it comes to, I feel like they can ask you about it individually, and they can just ask you what were the consequences of the Treaty of Versailles on Russia, or what were the consequences on Germany and Italy, for example. But they can be sneaky and ask you about it in the context of the Weimar. which is why, again, it's good to know the connection. And I recommend it all the time in modern history, but it's good to connect dot points where you can, because those connections make your theses and your answers much stronger, but they also show off to your marker. And guys, with HSC marking, I don't want to freak you out, but especially modern and how content heavy it is, these markers are marking like hundreds of papers every night, hundreds of same responses. You don't know if they're in a good mood. You don't know if they just got divorced. You don't know if they're depressed. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they're in a great mood, and so good if they are. But when it comes to marking, like if they're marking late at night, what if you're the last paper and they just want to mark you really quick, or they're in a really bad mood because their class annoyed them that day? You don't know the mood of the HSC markers. And not that you should be subject to that, but in saying that, I think it's always good to just show off to your marker a little and just take those little steps to just do something a little bit extra. I'm not saying for a 3 marker, write a whole page response, because that's just dumb. That's just dumb to really, really go over the lines and write like this massive response for something small. But little things like these and these little tricks where it's make a connection or connect one catalyst to the other, go like one line over, have the specific 132 billion gold marks instead of saying that the consequences were reparations. Those little tricks are what makes you stand out to those types of markers who are in a bad mood or who aren't really, feeling it. It sucks to say that, but realistically, they're marking so much. You don't know who these teachers are. I don't know if you guys have good modern teachers, bad modern teachers, but it just depends. And I think that this trick is kind of foolproof because you write a stronger response, and whether they're in a bad mood or good mood, they can't really mark you down for that, or they can't look beyond that. Like, they have to acknowledge what's there. And even if they're not in the mood to acknowledge what's there, you've gone a step ahead, so they're forced to. So it's kind of manipulate the manipulative markers and get around them. That's my advice. Okay, we're going to talk about the rise of extreme right nationalism, which starts with the Beer Hall Putsch, where Hitler and the Bavarian leadership unite to take over Munich. They storm the Beer Hall meeting and declare that the national revolution has begun. The Nazis entered there, but this is where Hitler gets arrested. The Nazi party's banned. He uses his trial as a way to generate support, and it was front page on the newspapers for weeks and weeks, which really brought even more and more attention to him. And then obviously in jail, that's where he wrote Mein Kampf. If you guys are looking for quotes to use for Hitler, I really recommend getting them from Mein Kampf, only because obviously it's a primary source, it's written by him, but it shows a lot about the Nazi ideology by the creator of Nazism. So I recommend, if you are looking for historian quotes for the core, that's a good place to start, especially primary quotes, primary sources. But the Beer Hall Putsch was actually good for Hitler because he realized that the revolution wasn't the way to forward for the Nazi party. They needed to gain power legitimately, constitutionally. And that's where they realized that they could capitalize on the failures of the Weimar rather than revolutionizing and turning to violence, and causing commotion with the army and everything. So back to Weimar and how bad they are. The Weimar government was really struggling to keep up with reparation repayments. And then the occupation of the Ruhr began, where France and Belgium sent troops to take control. The Weimar ordered passive resistance against the French aggression, but the Ruhr was occupied, and because of that, the industrial production fell, and the German economy experienced hyperinflation. So I want you guys to start noticing the patterns, and I hope you can. We just looked at the constitutional failures and politically why the Weimar was struggling, and that's because of proportional representation. Now we're looking economically why the Weimar was struggling, and that was because of hyperinflation as a direct result of struggling to keep up with the reparation payments, and France and Belgium's occupation of the Ruhr, which was their industrial heartland. So if they don't have control over their literal industry heartland, how they're going to generate money. And that's why the German economy struggled so badly. So when I talk about thematically, it's good to split them up. And if you are writing notes or if you wanted to take it down, that's the way that I will split them up. Now, in terms of understanding hyperinflation, guys, I know I'm teaching business studies, but I didn't do economics, but this is as basic as it gets. The hypothetical economy, bread costs $1. Bread costs $1. But in the hypothetical economy that's experiencing hyperinflation, bread costs $2. So the price of things are going up. So purchasing power prior to inflation. But then when you're experiencing hyperinflation, everything gets more and more expensive. So in Germany, things were becoming 4 times more expensive, then 6 times more expensive, then 10 times more expensive, and then it just went off the charts. So the government's response was so bad. They printed more money. They were like, no money. We're experiencing inflation. Let's just print more money. But then that just encouraged inflation further because the value of the marks were decreasing. I know everyone makes that joke and it's like, why don't we just print more money? But that literally decreases the value of money and just worsens the conditions of the economy. And then paper money was rendered useless, so they went back to the old system of bartering. And by the end of 1923, a loaf of bread was 201 billion marks. But they cost 0.63 marks in 1918. So in the span of 5 years, it went from 0.63 to 201 billion. 201 billion for a loaf of bread. You could not catch me paying that much for bread. Sorry. It's not happening. But it affected different groups in different ways. For the working class, well, they didn't really have no savings to lose because they didn't have money. But they did face unemployment and they were unable to afford all these exorbitant prices. For the middle class, they lost all their savings. Their rent was inflated and they also had to suffer with unemployment. And upper classes and foreigners benefited from inflated rental prices or their currency because they were renting out and obviously had properties and prices were going up. So they were benefiting off that profit of the prices going up. So, of course, the upper class is living life loving and the working class and middle class is really, really struggling. And Stresemann calls off passive resistance in the rural, and then he introduces the Rentenmark. Now, I want to go a bit into Stresemann because he is a real one. I feel like even here, we've gone straight to the Great Depression, but Stresemann really turned around, and it's just sad that he died right before the Great Depression started because he was turning around the entire kind of state and was really helping them economically. So I like to call it the calm before the storm, or kind of the golden years. That's what they refer to. But the in-between period, and I hope you guys can note down just about Stresemann if your teacher didn't go into big detail on him, because I know my teacher didn't, and then I was reading about it and I found out in a textbook, and then I ended up using it in one of my responses. But the Weimar was really, really struggling. But I feel like it's unfair to be like the Weimar was so horrible and so bad. And in modern, this is another piece of advice. It's never good to always look at the bad or always look at the good. It's always good to look at the balance. So even like with every source, there is no source that is perfect. There can be like a really great source, but there's got to be one limitation of it. You don't want to just write about how great it is. You also want to talk about how limited it is, or how it might be factually reliable, but in terms of ideology, in terms of attitude, is it as reliable? Or is it just showing one side? And even when you come to do the national study, you want to look at like the successes and the failures. So when we're looking at the Weimar Republic, it's really easy, and when we're making this point that the Weimar failure was the reason for the Nazi success, it's really easy to be like, okay, well, these are all the failures. But then you're looking too much on the extremes on one side and not enough on the other. So yes, we've been looking at the constitutional failures and the economic failures, but if we're looking at the successes of the Weimar Republic, that comes in with Stresemann. He detested the Treaty of Versailles and he wanted to regain international prestige. So he was like, okay, let's make the treaty work for them. And this was in between 1924 and 1929. So he had three specific plans that helped build up the reputation of the Weimar again. So one was the Dawes Plan, where it fixed annual reparation payments at a manageable level, and it increased Americans' loans to Germany. So America was loaning even more money to Germany, which helped revive the economy. And that was great because they could get some more money in. And then France also assured within this Dawes plans that they would leave the Ruhr within a year, which means America's loaning them more money. Yay, we have more money, we can help our economy. And France was going to leave the Ruhr, which was their industrial heartland, which means they can get back to production and producing at the level that they were. So that's already great. Then comes the Locarno Treaties between 1925, which was between Britain, France, and Germany. And this legitimized the Belgium-German borders and the France-German borders, but it also allowed Germany entry into the League of Nations, which they were banned from joining during the Treaty of Versailles. So he really detested and kind of was going back to the treaty and changing the conditions of it through peace. And then Germany ended up entering and being allowed access into the League of Nations. So that just shows that, yes, the Weimar was bad in that area, but Stresemann really came in, and there were successes. And then the Young Plan of 1929 revisited reparations. It brought an end to the military occupation in the Rhineland. And then Germany started again to become a cultural and technological hub. They were getting back on their really high production levels and really succeeding. So that's why they call them the golden years. And it's between 1924 and 1929. But the big guy who did it is Stresemann. The issue is a month before the Great Depression starts, Stresemann dies. So this great guy who's doing all this great stuff for Germany and all this great stuff for the Weimar Republic, literally reversing the Treaty of Versailles, making everybody happy, he dies. And then a month later, they're like, hey, it's the Great Depression. So the Great Depression starts, but the issue was that the economy was too tied with the US. And the Great Depression obviously started with the fall of Wall Street in America. So when Wall Street fell and the US economy fell, so did Germany. And like I said, in the Dawes Plan, America increased their loans to Germany under Stresemann. So that meant that there was even more money that they originally wouldn't have had to owe back now that they owed. So the American loans were no longer available. American tariffs were an issue, and obviously America was trying to build back up their economy, so they wanted their money back after increasing their loans. By 1932, industrial production in Germany was at 58% of its 1928 levels. So there was really, really big mass employment. And the Weimar government, surprise, responded poorly. So they were like, oh no, the Great Depression, everyone's suffering economically. Let's raise taxes and cut wages. That's how we're going to make money. And then Chancellor Brüning asked Hindenburg to invoke Article 48 to pass on unpopular deflationary policies. But then Hindenburg used that and dissolved the Reichstag and called for new elections, which is where Hitler starts campaigning. So in 1928, the Nazi Party only had 12 seats in the Reichstag, but by 1932, after the Great Depression, they had 107. And here we've got a quote from a historian, Stephen Lee. The non-manual employees, civil servants, and teachers who aligned themselves with Nazism were a direct result of the Depression. So a lot of people, out of kind of like a last resort, and even civil servants, teachers, and non-manual employees turned to Nazism because the Weimar had just consistently kept failing them. They had, and when you look at it, like, the Weimar was doing really bad politically and economically. Then Stresemann comes in and it looks like he fixes things and it's going back up. Then he dies and the Great Depression starts and it goes straight back down. And the reason it took like a really sharp and like a steep, like downhill track is also because Stresemann, under his plan, increased American loans, which now tied them even further and made the effect even worse. So people were just kind of at a last resort, and a lot of people started to support the Nazi Party. And again, that's because of the failures of the Weimar Republic in handling the Great Depression. So Fun part is where everything starts going down. This is where the appointment of Hitler as Chancellor begins. I just want to check that there's no questions because I've been talking for a while. Guys, is this all making sense so far? I hope so. I really hope it is. Just want to make sure there's no questions. Okay, if you guys have any questions, please leave them, because I don't want to like talk and you guys are confused and I'm not getting back to them. I know we've got a question about source analysis, but we'll answer that in our dedicated Q&A because I don't want to just like quickly skim over it because it's a really good question. All right. Sorry, I know this is so content heavy. I'm trying to simplify as much as I can, but there's like a lot to talk about in the core. We're trying to get through the entire topic. So now we're up to the dot point, which is the initial consolidation of Nazi power, which I probably hate this dot point the most just because I feel like it's the most boring. But that's just me. So Hindenburg was hesitant to appoint Hitler even though the Nazis had the most seats, which I wish he stayed hesitant, and didn't call an election for him to literally win. It's literally his fault. But he was just concerned that he was too fanatic, the growth of the SA, which was their secret police, and then he appointed someone else instead. But Hitler still had really, really influential supporters, and his significant ally was the former chancellor, who suggested Hitler needed to be controlled, and he believed that Hitler could be manipulated. So Hitler relents, and then he ends up appointing Hitler as chancellor by 1933. And on that evening, and this is a good quote to use if you are talking about this dot point, it's Hitler declaring that the new Reich has been born, and literally within 2 months, if you look at like 1933 and how quickly they consolidated power, all political power in Germany was held by Hitler. How did they do that? What a coincidence. It's the Reichstag fire. So this happened literally the month after, not even a month. Literally less than a month. 26 days after, what a coincidence, the Reichstag catches on fire. Who did it? Hitler spreads the myth that it's a communist outrage, and the culprits were believed to be a group of communists, which easily already puts the communists at deficit, and he's consistently targeting them. But the justification for Hitler's extension of the decree for the protection of German peoples and Reichstag fire decrees suspending the right to assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and various constitutional protections. So he really capitalized off this Reichstag fire to implement these types of laws, and he used it to justify the persecution and arrest imprisonment of their political opponents. So the Reichstag fire was a catalyst for the consolidation of Nazi power, only because Hitler capitalized off blaming and spreading myths about who caused it, and then could use that to justify killing his own political opponents. And what a coincidence, the Communist Party is banned, so his literal biggest enemy in the Reichstag is out of the picture. Now, the early policies and reforms, horrible. By March, Hitler had dictatorial powers over Germany, which no longer required the approval of the president. So technically, he was just fully in charge. He passed them through both the Reichstag and the Reichsrat, which meant that it was a legal dictatorship, which it doesn't make sense that it happened. And this was like a key moment where everything kind of switched. But he had so many different deals with different parties that convinced them to vote for the Enabling Act. And the only party that didn't actually vote for them were the Social Democrats. And they tried to boycott the proceedings, but they didn't. So in the end, Hitler still had full support. And like we said before, a big reason for that was from the collapse of the Weimar. And then 6 months after he gets elected, all parties are banned from operating, and it's literally just the Nazi party. So you best believe they consolidated all their powers. I can't even say this word, guys. Reichskonkordat. Soz. Can't say it. But this one was meant to guarantee the rights of the Roman Catholic Church in Germany as long as they were subjected to the authority of the Nazi Party. But that's really kind of ironic, because clergymen obviously have the big kind of focus on love thy neighbor, and are very big on Christian values and Catholic values, of love and forgiveness and compassion and care. And a lot of the actions and the complete ideology of Nazis, especially their persecution of Jews, of communists, and of their enemies, does not align with Christianity whatsoever. But the Nazi Party began to breach the agreement as soon as it was signed. And the Catholic Church couldn't do much because they had already signed it and they were subject to the authority of them. July, big time. This was a big year. 1933 and 1934 were big years, but that's the Night of Long Knives, where he purged his own party, literally his own party, through murder and arrest. 85 fatalities, but officially there was 85. They believe that it's up to 200 people, and most of them were assassinated by the SS or the Gestapo. And then the leaders of the SA were one of the most targeted groups. So in particular, the Ernst Röhm, who was leader, and he's one of the key features and one of the people that we look at. But Hitler was worried that many of the members had taken the more socialist aspect of the ideology too seriously. So now he wanted to suspend these like worker liberties. So he got worried, instead of being like, let me have a conversation with these people, let me demote these people, he was like, I'm just going to kill them. I'm just going to kill and arrest them. And that's Hitler's mentality. Then President Hindenburg dies, 2nd of August 1934. And this Hitler's partying at this point. Like how everything came into play, he just capitalized off everything. And because he had the support of the army, he combined the role of president with the chancellor. So now he declares himself as Führer. He abolished the office of the president. And when he was Führer of Germany, he was basically just the god of Germany, just in charge of absolutely everything, and officially enshrined in law and in title, he was the dictator of Germany. So the President Hindenburg's death was the final consolidation of power, where this is where he gets to the full dictator power, where it's in law and in title. But all those events, and the Reichstag fire, and the Nazi Party winning the elections, and then the Night of Long Lives, all of those add up to this complete power that he consolidates by President Hindenburg's death in full. So the overview of Nazi ideology: it's twisted, it's disgusting, it's determining. You already knew this. It's really hard to learn about because it's really sad how horrible the ideology was. But it's still important that you understand it beyond morality, and it's hard to, because learning about it and what they were like to women and to children, the Holocaust, the Jews, how they were killing people in concentration camps, horrible. But they're not going to ask you, was Nazism bad? Like, they're not going to ask you a morality argument in the exam. It's got nothing to do with the morality or if it was good or bad. It's more the analysis of it, how different people were attracted to Nazism. So, as like uncomfortable and like wrong as all the content is, it's not coming from a morality point. So you just have to make sure you're still seeing it factually, because I feel like it's really easy to get into the mindset where you can start to follow like a morality argument unconsciously. But it's good if you stay on track with just the ideology. And the way that I did that was by sticking with themes and looking at like the political ideology, the economic ideology, the social ideology, the military ideology, just looking at the different themes so that you're separating it from like our morality. So the tenets of Nazism were outlined by Hitler in his 25 points of the Nazi Party and within his memoir Mein Kampf. So when you're looking for quotes for Nazi ideology, these two are the best to go to. I think Mein Kampf has some really, really good ones, just some of them like main points. And there's actually one that I've put in a slide soon that you guys can take a screenshot of and use. But the 25 points also have really good ones to use. But Nazism is literally a complete mirror reflection of the beliefs of Hitler. So it's the essence of his ideologies imbued within his speeches, writings, and policies. And his ideology was as fluid as Hitler allowed, and it always suited his agenda. So there was always kind of inconsistencies and contradictions in the regime, but because it was still under his authority and he was dictator, it didn't really seem to matter, because he was dictator, so what he said goes. Um, but he would shift his ideology, and sometimes it would follow one way rather than the other, and then it would switch just depending on his own agenda, which makes sense because that's dictator behavior. So in terms of nationalism and Volksgemeinschaft, nationalism and Volksgemeinschaft, it's an extreme form of nationalism. It's very big on safeguarding German interests, which means there's no diplomatic intentions or aims to improve relations. So another connection you can make is when you compare Stresemann and the work he was doing in the Weimar, where he's having these plans, he gets Germany admitted into the League of Nations, he's improving the border relations, and he's obviously got good connections with America if they're gonna increase the loans. When you look at Stresemann, what he was doing diplomatically and internationally, it was much more towards peace. Hitler, peace wasn't an option. He wanted to take over the world. So if anything deemed to counter Germany's interests, any treaties, any negotiations, any policies and legislations were ignored. If it was anything that could be a threat, Hitler didn't want it. But honestly, if it had anything to do with peace, he didn't want it either. He was so big on just Germany succeeding. And a good word for this is ethno-nationalist. So if you wanted to explain how they kind of define German interests and what's safeguarding that, it's because they were ethno-nationalists, which is the idea that being German was to do with your ethnicity and blood. So this is where Volksgemeinschaft comes into play. It means people's community. I don't recommend learning like all the German words, but this is one of the ones that you 100% should know. And it's good that when you use it, you put people's community in brackets, just because, again, it's one of those little things that you can do. Just go a little bit above, but it makes your response stand out. So Volksgemeinschaft is the belief that all Germans should unite and work together to reduce inequality. But that was very surface level, and it was never actually followed. It was more like all the German people coming together, like we're one big people's community, and it was very idealistic. But it was really just a product directly of Nazi propaganda. So then other parts of the nature of Nazi ideology are totalitarianism and the Führerprinzip, which is another one of the German words that I really recommend learning. So it means the leader principle, and it was the words of the Führer are above the law. So it basically just gives Hitler complete power, almost godlike. And it's the central basis of the political power in the governmental structures of the Third Reich. So Hitler wasn't just the Führer of the Reichstag, but of the German state and its people. So like we said before, in law and in title, he was completely dictator. Like he was the entire dictator. So he was a political father figure. And that's why all the propaganda is always like really creepy, and it's him with little kids. But that propaganda is to directly put him out to be that father, that real father image. So all other political parties were banned, along with groups that held a level of political influence. And then eventually, like we saw before, no activity or organization in Germany existed that was truly independent. It all had some influence by the Nazi Party. But censorship and propaganda played a key role in maintaining this. And connecting the two is really important, because that's how the cult of personality around Hitler began. But Hitler was the first and last person to hold the title of Führer. All right. And then social Darwinism comes into play, which is the beliefs that certain races are superior, so Aryan Germans, and others are inferior, which are Jews, Slavs, Roma, and Black people who were persecuted by the Nazi Party. They justified Lebensraum. So Lebensraum is the idea of living space. And when you talk about it in a really broad concept, Hitler genuinely wanted to take over the world. He wanted to start with Germany, but he wanted to take over the whole world. Like, I know that sounds like oh, everyone wants to take over the world. He literally wanted to have influence over the whole world, and be this really great leader of absolutely everyone and everything. So that's the idea of Lebronsom, is like taking over space. Um, but to start that campaign, he wanted space for his Aryans, and he believed that the Jews, Slavs, Roma, and Black people were taking up that space. And he was like, well, you're taking up our space. Let's turn to concentration camps and horrific treatment, by vilifying any non-Aryan groups. And this is where eugenics or racial hygiene comes into play, which is the aim to biologically improve the Aryan master race by cleansing unworthy life from the gene pool. So it's really horrible, and this is where it's hard to not blur the lines between morality and what you're learning. But it included the extermination of these groups, where they used mass euthanasia, forced sterilization. They had laws that prevented sexual and romantic relationships with Aryan and non-Aryan people. They really did all that they could to cleanse the inferior races out of their gene pool, which is absolutely horrible. But like I said, Lebronson, which again, see how like in the lecture we've got the German name and the brackets. That's one of my tips that I always recommend in modern, just for standing out, just so you have in your, I feel like the brackets, I don't know, like I see living space and I get my argument just from the word living space, because he obviously like wants to have all this living space for people. I feel like it can help your memorizing because there's so much content in modern. But it also has the German definition there. But Lebronsom is the expansionist desire of the Nazis to occupy other countries in order to provide greater room for the growing Germanic race, which he has to start in Germany. And that's why it's so closely tied to social Darwinism, because inferior groups were dominating space that could be used for Germans. How's he going to grow the Germanic race to other countries when he believes that he doesn't have enough space in his own? That's kind of how it goes. And it was used to justify German colonialism in Eastern Europe, which stipulated that almost all of native populations of Eastern Europe needed to be permanently removed. So this man was crazy that about this living space idea and how much space Germany needed, but it was really just coming from greed and power. Other elements when we're looking at the nature of Nazi ideology come economically. And economic self-sufficiency means that a nation doesn't require outside assistance of resources in order to survive, which is why Germany was very big on being self-sufficient. And again, when you compare it to Stresemann, who's really relying on outside sources, on plans with Britain and France and America to help build back up their country and reverse the mistakes of the war, this is like the complete opposite. So it's weird to think that if Stresemann kept going, if the Great Depression didn't happen, if Hitler never came to power, how different would our world look? But Hitler was very big that Germany didn't need anyone. They blamed the other countries for the war. They didn't believe in the treaty and obviously thought it was a stab in the back, and that it wasn't fair. So it does make sense that they were very big on being economically self-sufficient. It wasn't immediately achieved because they continued to pursue international trade. And this is what I was saying before, when his like agenda, he just follows his agenda. So ideology could, and at times was inconsistent. Like it doesn't make sense that he's so big on being economically self-sufficient, but that he's still pursuing international trade and having relations with other countries. But that's because he wanted to follow that certain political agenda at the time, and then he would switch back to autarky, where he'd want to be super economic self-sufficient and didn't want anything to do with other countries. So depending on his agenda at the time, Hitler would pick and choose which parts of the ideology he wanted to follow. But through it, the Nazis sought the creation of more jobs for unemployed Germans, which was good for the economy and good for the industry, good for them economically. But the conditions of the work weren't good for them socially or morally whatsoever. Why did Nazism have supporters? And here's a quote from a Jewish communist historian. So he says, in Germany, there wasn't any alternative left. Liberalism was failing. If I had been German and not a Jew, I could see I might have become a Nazi, a Germany nationalist. I could see how they'd become passionate about saving the nation. It was a time you didn't believe there was a future unless the world was fundamentally transformed. And this is a really good point, especially that last quote where it was a time when you didn't believe there was a future, because a lot of the reasons why Nazism was supported so heavily by the nation was because they were in such turmoil. There was such chaos, there was such lacking faith that they had to turn to extremes, because if it wasn't that, there was nothing to hold on to. And obviously Germans were very passionate about their nation, very passionate about their country and saving it. So it didn't seem like, when we look back on it, it's so easy to be like, how could they possibly support that? But in those conditions, after losing the war so horribly, and then watching their political parties literally fall to pieces, watching their economy fall, watching literally everything in their country fall apart, it unfortunately makes sense that they could turn to something so extreme. Other quotes, so Nazism seemed to many just an extreme version of what most Germans had always believed in or taken for granted. They welcomed parts of Nazi political and told themselves the rest was less important or not meant seriously. And again, Nazism was very big on propaganda and censorship, and they really had that whole idea of the people's community and German nationalism and Germany being the best country and bringing Germany to number one, which is what Germans and most Germans always believed in. So they could capitalize off those like kind of historic beliefs and that patriotism that they already felt, and use that to cover what they were really doing and use it as an excuse. And again, because everyone was at such a low point, it was easier for them to turn to such extremes. And then there was the intersectional appeal, where nationalism appealed to the nationalists and imperialists, socialist elements attracted to the workers, anti-communism appealed to the rich. So when you look at the different sects, because the nature of ideology, of Nazi ideology, had so many different factors to it, them being against communists, automatically the rich people and the upper class were like, okay, we like them, we don't like communists either, we think they're stealing our money. Then the socialist elements attracted to workers, and that's why they created the Workers' Party, and the workers wanted to be involved. Their ideology, because it was always serving a different agenda, Hitler could manipulate it to fit different people's wants, and that brought all these different groups of appeal to them. All right, I want to quickly look at this source, which was also from my trials, guys. So explain the values and limitations of source B in understanding the nature of Nazi ideology. I'm going to create a poll on this, because I'm interested to see what you guys think, because now we've gone through Nazi ideology. So I am curious. I want you guys to have a read of this. And again, it's the values and limitations in understanding the nature of Nazi ideology. So you want to say I want you guys to just have a think before I launch this question. You want to think what's good about it, what's bad about it. We're looking at both. So have a little think. I'm going to launch this question if it wants to load. When it load, or even if you guys want to leave anything in the question box. Okay. All good. Well, I hope you guys can see that. You can name any values and limitations below, and I want to go through them just so we can look at your answers, and again, it's completely anonymous, so leave what you think, and then I can give you guys some feedback on your answers, which can hopefully help. It doesn't have to be anything super, super fancy, because it is 7 marks, so you want a couple of values and a couple of limitations. You don't have to write a full paragraph, guys. It can just be simple. I know it's still the morning, but we'll have a look at this. Okay, we've got lots of people typing. Thank you for this. I was just going to read out the answer, but I want you guys to be able to get feedback from this. All right, so far, comes from Hitler himself, primary, and gives direct insight into the leader's perspective of his role. That's true. That is a value because it is primary source. And that's always look in terms of when we're looking at values and limitations. That's so good that you recognize that. It's so good to always look, is it a primary source? Is it a secondary source? It is a primary source. It's directly from Mein Kampf, which is written by Hitler, who's the leader of the Nazi party. So it does explain the ideology. Perfect. Who said that? Who said that? That it's an extract so it doesn't show the fully complete text, could reveal something else. You guys are too smart. That is such a good point. Guys, if you ever see an extract, this is such a way to finesse the system. I'm so proud of that person. If you ever see an extract, always say that it's a limitation because you're only getting one part of the text. And of course, in this context, you can assume that all of it's going to go along the same lines because it's Hitler and he's a literal fanatic about Nazism. But that's just an assumption. You don't know that because it's an extract and you've only got a little piece of the text. So there could be something completely different after, or you're not getting the whole picture. This is just one part of it. So always, if you ever see an extract in history and they're asking about the value of the source, it's automatically limited because you're only getting a part of it. Perfect. Values the source author is by Hitler, reveals his insight on Nazi ideology, what it stands for. Very good. Limitations, not all aspects of Nazi ideology, only fewer principles. So true. That's another thing. And you can combine this with the extract part. You can say, yes, it's limited because it's an extract, so we can't see the full picture. But on top of that, it's only looking at one element of Nazi ideology. It's not talking anything. Where has it mentioned anything about their economic anarchy, where they're talking about self-sufficiency? Where has it mentioned anything about eugenics and how big they are on the people's community, Volksgemeinschaft? Like, this is only one part of kind of Hitler's leadership, but it's asking the nature of Nazi ideology. And I'm really happy that you guys picked this up. Someone else said, you guys are so smart. You guys are so smart. Let's read this. Guys, everyone's getting 7 out of 7. Everyone gets full marks. Everyone gets a gold star. Only examines the governmental stance of Hitler, despite the quote stating the movement stance is so true. The extract has some missing parts, only offers one perspective. Or true, 7 out of 7. Provides a general overview of the government stance on National Socialist movements in terms of its extent to exercise authority. Primary sources, different quotation. Yep. It tells us Hitler's view on power. It's Hitler, it's bias, so true. Some insight what Nazi ideology plans to do with power. Guys, you're killing it. Yep, so whoever said doesn't describe the methods used to achieve these principles, very true. It's just what the principle is. But I'm happy that you guys are picking up that this isn't like a full description. Like, it's great for understanding the nature of Nazi ideology politically, but when we're looking at the nature of Nazi ideology economically, socially, the military stance, the international stance, what you get, this extract gives us nothing. Like, literally give us nothing. Give us nothing. And if it asked, explain the value of value and limitations of source being in understanding the political power that Hitler held for Nazi ideology, then great. This source, you can't make that argument. But it's asking about the nature of Nazi ideology as a whole. And this is why I wanted to put this source in, because this is where they trick you, where a lot of people would read this and be like, oh my God, such a good source, like primary source, Hitler wrote it, talking about his power. But like one of you guys said, it's the Nazi movement stands for, and then all he's literally talking about is himself and his power politically, and like where his role in society is. Says nothing about what the Nazis party's aims are, says nothing about what they're doing in society, their different thematic concerns. Zero. Give us nothing. Someone said in this type of question, you could say that bias is a value because it reveals Nazis' perspective and what they truly saw. Guys, you guys are so smart. That is so true. And we're going to go into it a little bit later. I've got that later in the lecture, that we're always taught bias is bad. Like, bias is bad. Bias is automatically a limitation. And it is a limitation, but it can also be used for value because it shows like the extent of the Nazi mindset. And especially coming from Hitler, you can see his own bias, but that reflects the extent of his ideology, if that makes sense. So it really reveals his perspective, which is really important in history. And then someone just left one more. Comes from Hitler, so it's valid in description. Extract only shows part of it. No mention of economic standpoints. Only one perspective. Ellipses means some of the quote has been extracted. Could mean a biased interpretation. Guys, you guys are too smart. You guys seriously need to take over this lecture for me. I'm so proud of all of you. Everybody gets 7 out of 7. Everybody gets 7 out of 7. These are all really great points. All you have to do now is put that into a paragraph. 7 out of 7. You guys are getting there to 25 out of 25 in the core. These guys, like, I seriously, honestly did not see one incorrect answer. I'm very proud of you all. I hope you guys can see all those answers and go through them. What you'll find is a lot of them, you guys are all on the right track and all like at the same place where you're looking for the same things. But it's great that you can start. And when you're looking for values and limitations of sources, it's always good to contradict yourself. So be like, okay, it's a primary source. I always start, is it a primary source or is it a secondary source? For this one, we're like, okay, it's a primary source. It's written by Hitler. That's great. But then I'm also like, oh, it's written by Hitler. It's only from his perspective and he's only talking about himself. Therefore, it's limited. You get me? So I feel like if you contradict yourself, because like I said, in history, it's never going to be one-sided where it's completely yes, completely no, completely good, completely bad. There's going to be a good, but then there's going to be a bad from it. Like there's a lot of duality in history and that adds a lot to your mark. So I feel like looking at both sides was great, but understanding values and limitations is really good. And that's why I wanted to put this question in there, because it makes you look at the reliability, it makes you look at perspective, it makes you look at bias, and that's all stuff you did. I'm like a proud mum right now. I'm a very proud mum right now. That is all good. All right. How much more do we have? The core just keeps going. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we're getting there, guys. We've got the key figures, and then we've got the social, the laws, and then how they exercise power over certain groups. I'm sorry. This is a lot. Let me break it up for 1 second. And I'm going to quickly ask you guys this question. I want you guys to tell me what scares you the most about modern. We're going to get back to the content, don't worry. But it's a lot of work. This is a lot of work. And I'm actually curious so that in our Q&A, we can talk about some of these things. I want to know what scares you guys the most about modern. So is it that it's a 3-hour exam where you have to write 2 essays and then 2 25-mark short answers? Because I know that was my answer. Is it memorizing content and that it's so much? Because it is a lot. Like, it's insane how much information it is. Is it finishing the exam in time? Is it memorizing content, memorizing historian quotes? Is it doing source analyses? Can just be honest. Is it your teacher? Is it the kids in your class? Like, we're honest in here. We are honest in this house. So I just want to see how you guys are vibing. And then in our Q&A, we can talk about, and I can cater this second block and the skills that we're going to work on more to helping you guys diminish these fears. Yeah. So valid. So someone said writing 2 essays is my biggest weakness. That is so valid. The essays are so horrifying. And the way that it's just on one dot point, like I prefer the core because and even like the last section where you get 25 marks worth of short answers, because they can't just ask you on one thing. So yeah, you might not know a question about consolidation, but you know all about the Weimar now, and you better all know about the Weimar now. And then you feel good because you can answer that. But if you get a question and you're like, oh, this is like the dot point I know the least on, it's so horrifying. Someone said writing 2 essays without hand cramps. So funny. So true. Finishing 225 markers, remembering dates, names, and statistics across 4 different topics. Yeah. I feel like a lot of it's coming down to the essays, but also just the content. Someone said my teacher expects us to write 6 to 7 paragraphs in 45 minutes for an essay. That is a lot. That is a lot. Oh my God, we've got a student going to year 11 this year. You are so on top of it. You are literally already joining HSC. You are so on top of it. I hope you're enjoying this content. Oh no, someone didn't know it was 2 essay 25 marks. Oh, I'm sorry to that person. I didn't want to break it to you. I'm sorry. It's a bad finding. I didn't know that when I chose modern. I didn't know that until I started year 12. I did not know that it was 2 essays. I honestly think the modern exam is one of the most brutal exams in the HSC, because 2 essays is insane. Is insane. And like 25 mark essays, like plus the short answers. Like I know you do, like even in English in paper 2, you're going to do 2 20-mark essays and then a creative, but they're 20 marks. This is 2 25-mark ones. Okay, someone said memorizing content. I have a great memory, but all of my subjects are written subjects and most content heavy. Oh, yeah, I so get you. I feel like a lot of us who do, I was the same way. I did a lot of content heavy subjects. I feel like if you do modern, you just love to give yourself content heavy subjects, and it makes us hard. My teacher expects us to write 5 pages in 40 minutes. Ooh. Guys, these teacher expectations, we're not vibing with them. All right, so a lot of it is writing the essays and then memorizing names, dates, and events. Thank you guys all so much for answering that. What we'll do in our second section, a lot of it goes into like the short answer skills, but we can spend time going into memorizing and some study skills as well. But thank you all for answering. We've got 2 more people typing, and then we'll get back to our bestie girls. Okay, and timing, all good. Guys, I feel like a lot of us are like, it's on the same thing. Someone said, how many questions are there in the source analysis? So in the source analysis, I think the most I've ever done was 6. But that's by doing small amounts, because they can ask you from 2 to 12 mark questions, like value. But usually there's 4 or 5 in the short answer. Yeah, someone said time management. I find it bizarre that people actually finish. So true. So true. Like, it is so, finishing the modern exam, I still look back and I'm like, how did I do that? But again, I feel like even if you finish it, you're always going to feel like one section, there's so much that you have to do in the 3 hours, and like managing time. Like I always feel like there's one section that you just know you can't put your full effort into. And I'm going to be honest, and that was literally me. And I know that I did Arab-Israeli conflict, and I know my essay there, I know it lacked, but I had to sacrifice it if I was going to finish. I still finished the essay, but I know that it wasn't at the same level. But to be able to finish the exam, I was like, I'd rather kind of bodge this a little bit and finish than try really hard to like smash this out and then leave the last 25 mark section. It's crazy that exam exists. It's crazy that exam exists. Someone said, another fear which I have in modern history is being too subjective and emotional in my essays, which may degrade its quality and value, which is so understandable. But you're in year 11, which is good, because what you'll find is the more and more content you do, because it's so content heavy. I don't know, when I was in year 11, I was doing history as well. Actually, always throughout school during history, it's really hard not to kind of get emotional and like moral and kind of feel subjective, especially if you do have opinions about what you're learning. But because modern is so horrible and there's a new dot point every day and there's literally so much content, you get forced with content that it doesn't even leave space for your opinions anymore. You just feel like a content memory machine who's like existing off facts and statistics. But thanks for leaving those, guys, because I want to cater the second block directly to you guys rather than just being super general, and we can go through time management. We can go through sources and different elements for studying. So thanks for that. Let's get back into all the fun content. So fun. Joseph Goebbels, I'd say he's probably the most prominent individual. I think he's the easiest one to memorize just because he's Mr. Propaganda Man. So he was appointed Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda on March 113th. Clearly, I know my dates. It's March 13th in 1933. He cultivated and consolidated the Führer myth, which puts Hitler as like this ultimate godlike father. And he became the first president of whatever that word is. I'm sorry, I can't do it today. The Reich Culture Chamber. Propaganda under Goebbels took many forms, and that's what we all see with all the different propaganda sources for Hitler. So speeches, writings, pamphlets, leaflets, posters, radio broadcasts, films, music, theater, etc. And he merged forms of cultural expression with Nazi ideology. Then we've got Hermann Goering. Not that he's... I'm not going to start rating these guys as if any of them are good people, in my opinion. But I like to just give it from a base of advice. So I feel like when you're memorizing, it's good to know like two of them in pretty good detail. And I'd say that it's Joseph Goebbels and Goering, and the other two just kind of, and well, there's obviously more than another two, but the other ones just kind of go on and on. I feel like these ones are easy to memorize. Goering was a former military officer, so Hitler really trusted him with the command of the SA, which was this the secret police. He formed the Gestapo, and he was the one who established the concentration camps. So I feel like that's why it's kind of easier in terms of your memorizing, because you're like, okay, well, Goebbels was propaganda. Goering formed Gestapo, started the concentration camps. He was critical in the orchestration of the Night of Long Knives as well, because he was the leader of this Gestapo, and then he ended up becoming the leader of the German Air Force, and then by the end of it, Hitler declared Goering his successor. So I feel like he just did a lot and had a lot of like influence in different elements of the Nazi party, so that's why it's really good to involve him. Then there's Heinrich Himmler, who was in charge of the SS in 1929. That's different from the SA. So the role of SS was bodyguards of Hitler and the other prominent Nazi leaders. So they were very much literally bodyguards. They were very big on just protecting them rather than going out against enemies. And it was a much smaller body so that they could develop it into a powerful corps in Nazi Germany. He introduced two new key functions, so protecting the internal security of the country and then maintaining guardianship over racial purity, which meant that he took control of German police forces to have that internal security. And then in 1933 to 1934, he began to oversee the centralized concentration system across all of Germany. And then there's Rudolf Hess, who I literally forgot about. He was deputy Führer of the Nazi party, and had like a lot of responsibilities by like appearing on Hitler's behalf if he couldn't. He made speeches on Hitler's behalf. He signed laws, and he crash landed and was arrested in Britain, and then he was held in custody for all of World War II. So I'm not saying like, when I said before like the other ones are easier, it's not that this guy isn't a prominent individual, but when you compare him to Goebbels, or you can pair him to Goering, I just feel like it's much better to mention Goering, who was very big in orchestrating the Night of Long Knives, or who established the concentration camps. I feel like you're better off talking about him rather than memorizing Rudolf Hess made speeches on Hitler's behalf. I just feel like when you're looking at like the extent of their relevance, I'm not saying these guys are relevant. I don't want to come off like I'm saying the wrong thing, but I just, in terms of memory, guys, I feel like some of them are better than others. but not in terms of people. They're all really bad people. And then there's Ernst Röhm, who was influential during the early years of the Nazi Party, was given the role of SA chief. He wanted the German army to be incorporated into the SA, which wasn't a popular belief, and then ended up reducing the SA by 2/3 so that he could gain the army support. But as a result, Hitler was convinced this guy was a traitor, so Hitler literally had him arrested and then killed in the Night of Long Knives. All right, some of the laws. So there's the Nuremberg laws, which allowed Hitler to try opponents outside of the Supreme Court. So Hitler ended up just becoming the supreme judicial force. There was no point of literally having laws because now they had this people's court where he could try them outside legal, like, judicial power. This is how they institutionalized the anti-Semitism into law. So they had the Reich citizenship law, which revoked German citizenship from Jews and made them subjects of the state. But the status as a Jew was also determined by ancestry, not by any of your religious or cultural adherence. And then they had the law for the protection of German blood and German honor, which prohibited marriage between Jew and racial Germans. And then this was extended to other groups like the Romanian black people. But they also had other anti-Semitic laws. I can't speak. I'm losing it already, guys. Which allowed for discrimination of Jews. So a lot of the Nuremberg laws were literally anti-Semitism based. Propaganda and the cult of personality. So all forms of communication were opportunities to spread the Nazi message. Whether you went to the movies, you turned on the radio, they were like, here, let's pour Nazism down your absolute throat. There was the Hitler myth, which presented him as a powerful demagogue, but a mighty defender and such a nice guy in Germany. And Nazi propaganda was successful. So that's one thing to remember. It was really, really successful because it was so clear, it was so direct. They used the radio, and approximately 70% of German households had one, so it was really easy to get their message across to like normal everyday people. Cinemas had subtle propaganda. Education and Nazism was heavily featured propaganda in the curriculum, so they're like, you know what, kids, you're gonna learn what we want you to learn. And the Berlin Olympics was a propaganda opportunity for German people, but the entire world. So with censorship and them opposing all viewpoints from entering public consciousness, them burning books and censoring different texts, it was so easy for them to violently enforce like these mediums of communication. And a really good example, if you wanted a fact, you could use the 1933 book burning. This was one that I memorized, where over 25,000 books were deemed inappropriate and therefore destroyed. Other methods they used was repression and terror. This was mainly from the Gestapo because they acted outside the people's courts and they were mainly targeting the Jews, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and homosexuals. And they kind of had this omnipresence where like you never really saw them, but they were always kind of there. So it really created a culture of mistrust and you never would know what was going on. The SA implemented Kristallnacht, which they broke into Jewish businesses, and terror resigned over the Jewish community. And then the SS took control of the concentration camps and were operating key positions in the police force, along with agriculture and health industries. So you couldn't escape terror. It was repression and terror were genuinely everywhere. In terms of cultural expression, the Reich Culture Chamber supervised and regulated all facets of German culture, from film, music, theater, radio, chamber for fine arts, press, writing. Nazism was literally everywhere. I feel like that's the point of like the impact of the Nazi regime on life. And when you're looking at the various methods used for power, it's literally just Nazism was everywhere. Like no matter where you turn to in life, the Nazis were genuinely there. In terms of religion, pre-Nazi Germany was really, really Christian. But obviously under the Nazis that changed because little religious freedom was allowed, because that was like you were worshipping higher powers instead of the state, and they were very big about worshipping the state and loving Germany, not religion. So not all religions were considered equal, and Christianity was only tolerated when it combined with the teachings of Nazism. But obviously that a lot of the teachings of both don't really align. And like we said before, Christians were, and the Catholic Church was subject and signed that they were subject to the authority of the Nazis. So religion just wasn't going to happen. Workers, so a significant portion of the Nazi party supporters were workers. So it was really important that the Nazi regime was impacting their lives. And the Nazis wanted to maintain their support. So they introduced laws that reduced unemployment. They improved the working conditions, and that's through the Beauty of Work campaign. And then they had the Strength Through Joy movement, which provided the workers with a variety of off-duty luxuries, and like you could go on cruises and all these fun holidays. But then on those cruises, they would just sing Nazi songs and had Nazi flags everywhere. So everything, like I said, everything was always to the agenda of reinforcing the Nazi regime. And again, they would just change their agenda depending on which part of ideology they wanted to believe in today. But they still experienced oppression, so the abolition of trade unions, and workers from minority groups were especially treated harshly, with many policies created that negatively harmed their business. And that's why a lot of Jewish businesses fell apart during the Nazi regime. In terms of youth, you guys all know the Nazi youth, education, the Nazi youth, the Hitler youth. I'm just so big on talking about how big the Nazis were. Education was a powerful tool used to secure ultimate power, so that's where they enforced it into the curriculum. But Hitler also set up the youth, which was like a scary little child cult. And membership wasn't open to all individuals. So you had to be German citizen. You also had to be racially and ethnically Aryan. But on top of that, you had to be physically healthy and free of hereditary disease. So even if you were Aryan and a German citizen, if you weren't physically healthy or you had some type of disease, they were like, no, you're not allowed to be a part, which is really, really horrible. And then they had the League of German Girls, which is just to enforce the ideal German mother figure to young girls. And not all youth supported the Nazis, especially those who went to university, because they were going on to learn beyond the curriculum that was very set and enforced by the Nazi regime. And that's where they had more radical ideas. So women, so typical. The Nazi regime really had this big idea that of motherhood, and that the number one responsibility is that women should give birth. This again aligns with Lebrunsom and Living Space, because they want to populate Germany and increase the Aryan race, and you can't do that without women. So that's why they were so big on propaganda and having this whole image of motherhood, so that they could increase the Aryan population of Germany. They had financial and honorary incentives for having children, so like you could get these different badges for the more kids you popped out. They banned abortion, birth control information was suppressed, so there was no real way to get them. But it actually failed because there was overall decline in birth rates during the Nazi regime, because it was coming from a place of force. In terms of occupations, it was strictly domestic, so a lot of working women were sacked, weren't giving jobs. They were discouraged from pursuing a higher education, and politically women were underrepresented. What a surprise. They wanted them at home, giving birth, raising little Aryan children to go to the Hitler Youth. And the feminine ideal was that they were racially pure, ideally blonde with blue eyes, didn't work outside their domestic sphere, and that she was married and was a mother to many, many children. That was like the ideal, like Hitler's like dream idea of women, was completely motherhood and just staying at home, serving your husband. Some of the minorities, guys, so there was the Romani people, and 85% of them were killed by Germany, by the Nazis, but also homosexuals were believed to be a vice that needed to be eliminated. And unfortunately, the mentally and physically disabled as well. So even if you were Aryan, if you were mentally and physically disabled, you were seen unworthy of life. And they were victims of forced sterilization and mass murder, which is really, really horrible. And then the persecution of the Jewish people as a minority as well. They were like a visible minority. And in this photo here, this is how they always kind of put Jewish people into propaganda. It was always in like a really negative deficit light, and always as a very like greedy, like fat, big nose. Like they would make them like really big and like in weight, just so it looked like they were eating a lot and like taking everyone's people. They'd often put them with communism because they linked Jews to communists all the time. They blamed them as the scapegoats for the stab in the back myth and all the problems in Germany. They're like, it's literally just the Jewish people's fault. And they presented them as evil, capitalist, and inferior to that of Aryan master race. So between 1933 and 1939, the Nazi passed over 400 pieces of anti-Jewish legislation. So it's how crazy they were on anti-Semitism. And the dehumanization of Jewish people was perpetrated by propaganda and then state-sponsored physical violence like Kristallnacht, which then turned into the concentration camps. There were civilians that were opposed, and it was usually younger generations, especially university campuses. So there were the Edelweiss pirates who rejected the Hitler Youth, but they ended up being arrested. So I feel like there was opposition to the Nazi regime, but because the Nazi regime was perpetrating literally every single element of life, there was no way that you could kind of get around it. And members were arrested, sent to prison, concentration camps, or they were executed. So it was really hard to get around them. And cultural opposition could be through fashion, art, and music choices, but that was like really, really resented by the Nazis. The church did oppose them too. So the Confessing Church was formed to protest the merging of the Protestant churches to form the Reich Church, but the Nazis ignored that. And although Catholic priests took a stand in opposition against the Nazis, 693 of them were arrested for oppositional activities. So yes, you could oppose the Nazi regime, but you were just going to get arrested and or killed. There was no real way around it, and I feel like that's always going to be the bottom line when you do look at opposition to the Nazi regime. There wasn't success in it because they just perpetrated too much power. There was the political left, which was the largest opposition. So this included Social Democrats, Communists, Marxists, Socialists, and trade unionists. So this was more of like the Reichstag parties and parties from the Weimar Republic. And they encouraged acts of sabotage, work to ruin absenteeism from the workers. But they were the most targeted group by the Gestapo, especially communists. And according to SS statistics, which again, it's their own statistics, so are we going to believe it? Approximately 20,000 of the 32,500 death sentences were ordered for communists. We'll make one. All right, short answer skills. So like I said before, short answers is obviously a lot of the time overlooked, but it's really easy to lose marks in them if you just rush them. Like you can think like 2 out of 3, 5 out of 7, 7 out of 10, pretty good marks, but then when you add it up, it's literally 72%, 18 out of 25. So it's so easy to quickly lose those marks, which is why it's not great to overlook it. In terms of structuring your responses, it really depends on what response you're doing. Like I said, like a 3 marker, why would you write a page for that? Why would you go like 6 lines over the lines for a 3 marker? That makes no sense. That makes 0 sense. If you want to band 6, fill the lines. If you really, really want to band 6, go like 1 or 2 lines over. But don't go overboard on the short answer because again, it's 3 hours. Do we have time to do this? Not at all. When it's 1 to 2 mark questions, get straight to the point. They literally don't care. They really don't care. When it's 3 to 5 mark questions, guys, we're going to be using full sentences and full stops. It's good to include at least 1 piece of evidence. But then as soon as you get to 6 to 8 mark questions, especially how it can get up to 12, I don't want to talk about it. Why do they ask 12 mark short answer? How is a 12 mark question short answer? I don't think 12 marks is a short answer question. I'm gonna sue Nessa for that. They're wrong for that because 12 marks is not short. But as soon as you get to 6 plus 8, honestly, just consider it a mini essay. And let's keep working through. Guys, some people are starting to leave names so you can upvote them and like them, and whichever one has the most likes gets the title and gets to be my fave student in our classroom. Integrating examples. I wanted to show you this. Let's do a little comparison. So imagine for this source, I wrote, source A is a photograph of a German family featuring a mother and her 3 blonde children. The photograph is in black and white and none of the figures are facing the camera. Sis, tell us nothing. Literally describe the photo. I can see that it's black and white. And I feel like when it comes to sources, it's really easy to fall into this trap where you're like looking, but like they don't care what's there. Like all of us have eyes. If you had something like this where the family shown in source A represents the ideal family unit in Nazi Germany. They are of Aryan descent as evidenced by their fair skin and blonde hair, and the females are dressed conservatively, reflecting the traditional feminine dress code of Nazi Germany. This image was most likely used as propaganda to encourage more Aryan women to have children. I don't know why I said it in my marketing voice. But do we see the difference? Do we see the difference? Where one is literally, it's like showing and telling. Like one is literally just like, give us nothing. Tell us literally what's in the photo. And the other one is using the elements of the photo to analyze. So instead of saying they have blonde children, they're blonde because they're Aryan, which is pushing the Aryan regime. Top tier thinking, top tier thinking. They also didn't underline the source. How dare they? And they don't explain the significance of the source. And so irrelevant, like literally tell us nothing. While this one has source underlined, the explanation is there, it's detailed description, 20 out of 20. Let's keep going. Integrating your own knowledge is important too. So that's like, when I say your own knowledge, like it's not like what you think about the event. It's just like that little stuff that you just kind of know. So it doesn't necessarily like just general information. I feel like everyone's really big on like memorizing facts and memorizing statistics. But if you just know something general, put it in there too. Put it in there too, because it adds to your response. Springboarding is a method you can use if you are struggling with short responses. I just wanted to put it in here so you guys can come back to it. But it's where you use the question to figure out what syllabus point they're referencing. So then you can think about what point you're going to bring up and then answer the source from there. Source skills are very overlooked. I think a lot of the time we really look at just like bias. Like, I don't know, I would always do that. But I feel like you have to look at why a source is useful beyond just how reliable it is, because perspective as well. Like we were looking at that Nazi one, and you guys are so smart. I will never forget that. I'm gonna screenshot the answer set. You guys are so smart. When we were doing that Nazi the Mein Kampf extract, you guys both looked at perspective and reliability, because you said yes, it's reliable because it's from Hitler, but that's only his perspective. So true, so valid for that. My smart children. But perspective and reliability is so important. Oh, sorry, whoever said that, Joseph Gervais. Sorry, that's my fave. Sorry, that's so funny. I like that one. Perspective and reliability are really, really both important. And you don't want to just, I feel like our teachers are very big on like reliability. Is it a primary source? Is it a secondary source? Like they're very big on like the factual stuff. But it's important to think about perspective too. And perspective is good. Like that Nazi perspective was great because it was from Hitler, but it's also only from Hitler. And yes, he's the leader, but it doesn't have any information about other prominent leaders or Nazi followers. So like there's always going to be something wrong. It will never be perfect. Guys, sorry. Hail highlighters, stop. Well, we're going to put the PFP with Hitler's painting. Don't worry. That is such a good idea. Thank you for that. You guys are funny. You guys are funny and smart. You guys are the entire package. And then we've got something that someone could talk about with photographs is photos can be posed, therefore making the message questionable. Exactly. Like photos can so be planned. So then you think, oh, it's a photo, it's a primary source, it's from the time, it's great. But like, what if the photo was literally planned to like communicate a certain message, which is literally all propaganda photos, all of them. They're not going to like publish a photo of Hitler like death staring a little child, but they'll publish a photo of him with a little Aryan girl hugging her and her smiling. But you don't know, is that actually what happened or is it posed? Question of the day. But you want to look at the relationship between perspective and reliability, which is why I said, guys, with every good thing of a source, there's literally an opposite bad thing. So always look at the duality. I feel so fancy saying duality. Always look at the duality. Always look at both sides of it. And when we're analyzing a source, you want to look at contextual factors. You want to look at the purpose and motive. You want to look at structural factors. Do you guys need to know this? No, because you all got 7 out of 7 on everything. But again, when you guys come back, and if you do download these slides, which you better, You better. You're forced to. It's a command. It's an order from me. You guys can come back to these, and when you're studying for these sections, go over them. Reliability test you can do is, was it produced close to the time? Was it produced by someone involved by the event? Was it produced to be published? Was it produced for what purposes? Was it personal purposes, political purposes, ideological purposes, educational purposes? List goes on. But these are some questions that you can ask in terms of reliability. And I feel like, why did someone say, where did she go? Why did someone say, where did she go? Wait, am I still on the... Can someone confirm that I'm still here? Because someone just said, where did she go? I would not leave. I'm not leaving for 8 minutes, guys. Don't miss me yet. I need someone to confirm that I'm still on this stream. Bit orkies. But yeah, these questions are ones that I definitely recommend really familiarizing yourself with, because if you can look at a source and you ask yourself, is it an extract? Was it peer reviewed? Was it produced for political ideologies? The answers to that are your values and limitations. So if you are struggling with sources, start at values and limitations. 100% start at values and limitations. That's what's going to get you through. So these are some sources that you guys can look at to get back of them. When we're looking at which of the two are more reliable, which one are we going to choose? Have a little think. And again, I was saying before, year 7 to 10, you're taught that bias is bad, but literally all of us are biased. Like literally all of us are biased. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm not biased. Like I think HNOS is the best thing in the world. Of course I'm biased. Like I work here. Of course I think that. But all of us are biased. And bias isn't always bad, and it can be useful, and it was useful in that Hitler and that Nazi Mein Kampf extract that we use. So it can be useful, and things that are useful to consider is bias to create evidence, bias in the survival of evidence, and then bias arising from access to surviving materials. What I want to do is I just want to quickly open this for you guys. So if any of you guys, because we do have 7 minutes until the end of the lecture. If it wants to save, I'm just going to create like a box where you guys can leave your emails, and then you guys will be getting a lovely email from me tonight. I'd send it sooner, but sis is doing business in half an hour. So I'll make a group chat for us, a Google Classroom for us. And we can have our party. So I'm going to open that for you guys now. Let me play that. Okay. Oh, wait, I don't want to show that. How can I, wait, can I turn that off? Oh, wait, no, I don't want to, oh, okay, wait. Can you guys let me know if you can write that in? Oh my God, what do you mean it went offline? Stop. Why did it go offline? Besties, what happened? They're trying to cancel us. Wait, can I still open that? I think I blocked it. I didn't mean to do this. Open voting, but don't show the answers. Okay, well, you guys can leave your emails. Besties, I didn't know I went offline, but thank you for telling me. Someone said W tutor. Thanks, guys. I can't believe it dropped me out. They're trying to cancel me. They're trying to get rid of me. They're literally trying to get rid of me. You can't get rid of me. Can't get rid of me and my kids, but it's good that I'm here now. Bit orkies. Thanks for leaving your emails. I'll add us all. I'll check a bit later which one was winning for the names, but we'll have a name. And guys, all gonna be besties. We'll have it. We can use it. Obviously, like it's holidays, so if you guys don't want to use it as much now. But I'm here. I'm here to live, laugh, love. We can all help each other. We'll post resources. If there's anything that you guys are struggling on, I can see if I can find any resources or any of my work from year 12. Someone said it did the same several times during the English lecture. Bye. It's my internet. It's my internet, guys. I think it's there. And then, guys, also, you'll have my email. So anything, if you ever want to chat, if you ever want to talk, hit me up. Literally hit me up. I'm happy to help. Yeah, I did teaching because I really love it. And I love teaching, and I love like working here because it's great like to help people. But I'm honestly happy to talk if it's anything like, if you guys ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. No, but we're there. All good. Yeah, someone said Hitler's censorship is rolling the grape for you. Literally, I feel like Hitler's trying to censor me. Hitler's literally trying to censor me from this ATAR notes thing. But I am gonna make this for you guys. We have a couple minutes left, but everything left, please, please, please download these slides. All of this is literally essay writing skills. To write like really good theses, and we've got like sample ones as well. But you guys aren't writing essays yet, so we wanted to put this in so you guys have access to it and you can always come back to it. There's sample essay paragraphs that you guys can read all throughout the rest of the lecture. But it's not even for this topic. It's not for anything that you guys would have done yet. I just wanted to pop it in there so that you have it. Okay. Thank you guys all for your comments. This was so fun. This was so fun, guys. We've got a couple minutes left. But please download the slides just so you have them. They're so good to come back to. Again, I'm going to email you guys, so you guys will have my email. So if it's anything that you personally want to chat about, I'm happy like to give my socials and we'll have a chat. If you ever need advice throughout year 12. But also we'll have this group chat. Tell me to say group chat one more time. We'll have this Google Classroom as well. And we can all post different websites, different resources, all of this. I'm still so cut that I was lagging. I'm so cut that I was lagging and I disconnected. That's so mean of me. It's literally Hitler. That's literally Hitler. But thank you guys all for your emails. I'll drop them. And while we're here, I want to check which one's winning. Okay. So the Joseph Goebbels wins. Okay, we're going to call it Joseph Goebbels. We're going to have the Hitler artwork photo. Does anyone else have any feedback? Someone said, what's your email again? But I'm going to send you guys the email with the code. So you'll see my email there. Someone said this was so slay. Thank you. You were so slay. You were so slay for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm sorry that it's like not probably what you expected. It's just because like that's not me. I like to make it, I like to be relatable, guys. No, I don't like to put up the front of like very pushy and super big on, I don't know, do 6 hours. You must do a past paper every week. That's not who I am. That's not who I was in year 12. So I'm sorry if it's like, I feel like this is like a chill lecture, but I still like to get through work. We're still going to get work done. We still got the work done. But I don't like to jam pack it and make it a stressful thing. Because it's not fun and I don't want to stress you guys out. This is supposed to help you. And if I'm sitting here like, yeah, why, how dare you not do 8 hours of study a day? I don't think it's going to help you guys too much. It's finishing in a minute. Live, laugh, love. Gonna miss you guys. But if you're doing business studies or you're doing studies of religion, you're going to see me again. I'm so sorry. Or if you guys are coming to the English Advanced lecture at UTS next week, see me in person, full meet and greet. But thanks for this. Sorry for my offgoing. I'm gonna make the Google Classroom, but I have to do it tonight just because I've got a couple other lectures today. But thanks for all joining. I'm very proud of you. I'm a proud mother. I will not forget those Nazi responses on the values and limitations. You guys are like so smart. You guys don't even need to be here. You guys don't even need to be here. You're doing so well. Very proud of you all. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the lectures. And I will send you all an email.